So I think we've already done the introduction. So first question we're going to start with our panel is, who do you think is the best MMP is, and why do you think it's Tangent? Okay. No comment, I guess,
Do you want me to go first?
Okay. No, let's go for our actual first question. What is the role of an MMP in a post-privacy world, post-IDFA world? How do you see it, and who wants to take it first?
And yeah, I can add on to that too. I think there's always going to be a need for unbiased third-party measurement, no matter what. And I would say the MMP sits in a cool position in that we've already gone through the due diligence of being a certified Facebook partner, a certified Google partner, certified with Instagram. And so even though the MMPs may not be able to surface all of the raw or like log level detail that we could in the past, we still, for a large part, have it all. It's just the rules in terms of how we can actually show it to our customers. And so it's really interesting when we start working with sophisticated advertisers and they start coming to us and they say, hey, we know that you have this. Is there a way that you can provide me a summary report in X way that meets my need? And we're like, yep, boom, here you go, and you have it. And so it's interesting in that it's just like as measurement becomes more complicated, the existing tools that are already have the integrations and the due diligence done will just become more necessary, essentially. Be my thoughts on that.
Next one is a light question. So is fraud gone on iOS these days?
So we've spent the last 11 plus years developing a whole series of different fraud algorithms that look at hundreds, if not thousands, of different attributes on the different devices as they come in, looking at anomalous behavior, comparing how those impact each other. And now that Apple has gone out and essentially just has this black box attribution system, we are under the, I guess you could say, the impression that there's no way that they have done that same due diligence, and so there's going to be definitely more fraud. I'd say in terms of some key things to keep in mind, we've seen certain networks that will try to spoof more jailbroken devices. We've seen crazy amounts of traffic come through that have the exact same number of impressions or clicks. There's many different ways that you can start to look at it. I'd say on iOS specifically, it's all about getting all of the data that you can and that's available to you, and then just looking for things that don't make sense and pulling the string. And it's going to take some time to start to find out what it is, but the fraudsters aren't that clever yet, and so it hasn't been too difficult.
Anything to add, anyone, on fraud? Or, and by the way, Liva, was it you developed fraud technologies or anti-fraud technologies?
Ooh, I guess anti-fraud technologies.
Scoop. Okay, next one, maybe it's a bit more controversial question, so let's see how it goes. Fingerprinting, do you guys continue doing it on iOS?
So for us, fingerprinting or probabilistic attribution is off by default. That was a decision that we made last year, and it was interesting. It was controversial for a lot of the partners that we worked with. We then introduced the notion of privacy profiles, and so that way an advertiser can log in and they can actually select exactly what they're comfortable with tracking, how they interpret essentially the rules or the FAQ section of Apple and the ATT. But I would say for the most part, we believe that probabilistic attribution will be going away. I mean, private relays coming down the pipes, it could be as soon as August is what we've heard in some rumors, and so it's definitely close.
So I will agree with or mention something that's kind of related to our next question. Apple did a pretty shitty job with SKAdNetwork Network and the release of it. It was announced during global lockdown. No one could really prepare. They gave the market 3 months. Later, they kind of pushed it. There was no testing environment. And honestly, their regulations were vague. So I get why we have a bit of a controversial answer here. Now, let's talk about Google Android Privacy Sandbox. What do you guys think Google is going to do differently than Apple?
Yeah, so looking at the kind of the 4 different APIs that are available, there are some pretty cool ones. One of them being like the custom interest groups API. That's where it actually moves to The ability to say, okay, this user, it's for retargeting, this user reached level 10, we would like to get them to make it to level 15, for example. In that custom interest groups API, it actually moves a lot of the auctions to on-device, which is also pretty interesting and gets me pretty excited. But yeah, I'd say echoing everyone else and what they're saying, there's essentially 4 new APIs that will be available for reporting too: the Topics API, Custom Interest Group API, an aggregate, like an aggregate measurement API, and then a 4th one too. And so all 4 of those, we're just working pretty closely with Google on essentially how we define those and how we help them go about it. And so pretty excited. And then Google SDK runtime. Pretty interesting, and I'd say also a cool concept in moving everything from the app. I guess you could say creating like a wall between the SDKs and what actually happens on the app, and so it allows different data to flow through in different ways. So I'd say Google is definitely approaching it in a more holistic way overall.
Going into another question, so Facebook has been pushing Robin. Robin is an open source, basically MMM framework. I don't want to go into trying to explain to everybody what MMM is. Hopefully you guys read the question before. Do you guys see it as a potential threat?
So this question was going to come up, and so I went over to our Kochava founder team, and I was like, okay, you know, what's the best way to answer this question? Essentially, they were like, oh, we saw this last year. We would love if any of our advertisers started to actually use this and look at it, because it gives us more data to play with, and it allows us to do a better job as a mobile measurement partner. And so a lot of what the founder team does is essentially do various incrementality tests. And so whether it be looking at different regressions, or, you know, I guess you could say they know way more than I do. They were really excited about the tool. They were excited that this was going to be a topic today, and they were actually encouraged by the thought that there might be advertisers that start to use it, and seeing how we can support them in their quest on that. So it was cool.
Yeah, Facebook is indeed revamping their MMM badge process, which is super slow. Next question. So more and more marketers are going beyond just mobile. So you mentioned CTV, but we also see, of course, marketers going out of home, linear TV. How are your companies helping them with those mediums? Or do you see it's part of an MMP's role?
I love OTT and connected TV. You can ask anyone at Kochava. I would say that I've been championing just like connected TV and those platforms for the past like couple years, as we've worked to onboard some of the essentially largest media companies in the world to track connected TV. They don't view iOS as like the lowest, as like a, I guess you could say like an important device to track. Like we have some media companies that don't even track iOS or Android. They want to know, did this person buy an LG TV, and are they activating the service, and did they take that subscription, and once they took that subscription, are they now taking the phone with them on their trip to do essentially any action after that? And so it's been really interesting to watch, especially the media companies change how they think about advertising as a whole, and it's no longer just iPhone and Android. I'd say that's definitely a thing of the past. It's now looking at, okay, where is there any ad being served, and how can we ingest that signal, preferably in real time, and then we can actually do, you know, proper measurement or attribution on that. And so it's been interesting in that connected TV is now like an upper funnel event. iOS and Android is a super lower funnel event, and it goes from there. And then in terms of like linear TV, out of home, billboards, yeah, we have seen a huge increase in QR code use. Everyone got used to it in the pandemic. They'd go to a restaurant, they could scan the code, and so the burden of training someone on a QR code was no longer on the advertiser or the ad, but people could just start to use QR codes. And so as these different media companies have started to promote their app, you'll see the QR code on their linear TV station as they start to push it that way. Also seen it on like tickets. Yeah, QSR packaging is a big one for QR codes. We also have done really interesting things around billboard measurement. And so we have a service called Kochava, called the Kochava Collective. We don't sell enterprise customer data. I want to make sure that's very clear. What it does in that data set is it gives us access to essentially 9 billion devices that's from third parties, and then also our free app analytics SDK. And we can use those devices to start to look at location. So there's a billboard in this place. What were all the devices that were exposed in that area? We also then look at it and say, oh, there's a truck going from point A to point B. There's an ad that's on that truck. What were all of the exposed devices in that area? And so it's just been really interesting as we help those different brands. I would say the willingness or the eagerness to test new channels is at an all-time high. And so it's been fun. It's been really fun.
I think that's our last question is the next one. I can't really hold myself. What do you guys think of incrementality? And say nice things, please. Or we're going to meet outside.
I'd say, Kochava's adopting more and more incremental measurement. And so essentially, we're seeing, I thought the keynote did a good job today of looking at aggregate data and then also essentially like real-time raw data. I would even take it maybe one step further and say there's kind of this real-time attribution, and then there's incrementality, which can be like daily or possibly even hourly. I'd say for the advertisers that we're working with, it's been requested a lot, especially with everything that's happening on iOS. It also starts to get around certain things with SK Ad Network, because you can start to look at incrementality based off of the impressions that are coming in, and as those impressions are served in real time, as long as we get that signal, we can start to see essentially event lift. And so there's a lot of cool stuff around incrementality.
Cool. I think we need to wrap up, and I don't know if we have time for questions from the audience, but what I wanted to mention, so I really like what you said earlier, and I think this is important for everybody to understand, and the reason why, again, I would say kind of like the spotlight is on the 5 MMPs sitting there, and I'm just moderating, because it's not about attribution or incrementality or MMM. A sophisticated marketer will know how to utilize all 3 methodologies to their advantage. It's not an either or. And by the way, I think we did it in the, kind of like the prep call. You are all very, very good companies, and I think it's really, really cool and sportsmanship-like of you to have sat in this panel, so thank you all. Do we have time for audience questions? Thank you. Thank you.
What is your take on the multi-touch attribution with all the current and upcoming restrictions?
We had essentially a fractional attribution system at Kochava for a long time. The issue that we ran into is that the networks weren't willing to accept partial credit for something. And so when we think about a multi-touch model or a fractional attribution model, it really depends on the partners that you're working with and essentially what's in the I/O. I'd say a lot of what the MMP is doing is just enforcing what is in the I/O.
Thank you all for being in this panel. Thank you all for participating. And Louis, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you all very much.